Okay, I'm gonna be real with you guys. This is gonna be a rough one. I only got my hands on NVIDIA's brand spanking new 4080 Super about 3 days ago and only got a working driver for it like a day ago. So if you're watching this video on launch day, then somehow I managed to cram more than a week's worth of work into 24 hours and I'm now dead. But my detrimental health decisions aside, the card we've all been waiting for has finally arrived, so let's see what's so super about the 4080 Super, or more specifically, the 4080 Super VENTUS 3X OC from MSI. But first, a word from me. Yep, if you want to support the channel and the work I do here, just keep watching the video. Or if you do decide to pick up anything mentioned in any of my videos, feel free to do so via my Amazon affiliate links in the descriptions down below. You get new stuff and help the channel while you're at it. Win-win. Okay, so like I mentioned, we're on the clock here, so let's not waste any more time. The 4080 Super is the new kid on the block, and it's a particularly murderous one. Just like the 4070 Ti Super off its not-so-super brother, the 4080 Super is entirely replacing the regular 4080. But unlike the 4070 Ti Super and the 4070 Super, for that matter, the 4080, these names, man, the 4080 Super doesn't come with double-digit spec upgrades. In fact, compared to the other two Super cards, it's an exceedingly modest upgrade over the card it's replacing. Both the 4080 and 4080 Super cards are built on the same 8103 die, and unfortunately, even though people like me hoped for an upgrade here, both feature 16 gigs of GDDR6X. Both cards even feature the exact same max TDP of 320 watts, and both max out at 90 degrees C. The most impactful upgrades the Super features over the vanilla 4080 include a bump in shading units of around 5.2% and a relatively mild uplift to base and boost clock speeds. Other than that, the Super also features a handful of additional cores and SMs, and gets a tiny boost to memory speed and bandwidth. But as we've known for a few weeks now, the spec bump isn't what makes the 4080 Super interesting. What makes the 4080 Super interesting is that NVIDIA has done away with the 4080's ludicrous $1,200 asking price, and will be selling the 4080 Super starting at $1,000. So essentially, we're getting something akin to an overclocked 4080 for $200 off. That's not too shabby. I mean, it would have been better if the 4080 launched for that price all those months ago, but at this point, I'll take what I can get. And speaking of things we got, before we put the new chip through its paces, let's take a better look at the card we'll be working with. MSI's RTX 4080 Super VENTUS 3X OC. Man, these product names are getting wild. The VENTUS 3X OC, as far as I know, is one of the new MSRP cards, which means that at launch, you should probably be able to find these specific cards selling for NVIDIA's recommended $1,000. And for that $1,000, it looks like you'll be getting your hands on quite the capable card. First of all, the card's a chunky boy, landing at 322mm long, 136mm wide, and 62mm thick. But even with it being that big, it doesn't feel all that dense, confirmed by a weight of about 1,543 grams. That's pretty lightweight for a card this size, but still enough to worry a little bit about GPU sag. Except you don't need to worry about that, because the card ships with a pretty sleek looking anti-sag bracket included right in the box. As the name would suggest, the VENTUS 3X is a triple fan card, equipped with MSI's Torx 4.0 fans, a substantial base plate, and a downright massive heatsink with an array of heat pipes running throughout the whole thing. All of which points to the VENTUS probably being more than enough to tame this GPU and all the other important bits. Oh, and MSI, not that you care, but I take the lack of even a single bit of RGB anywhere on this card as a personal attack. And my day is ruined. Luckily, minus the lack of lighting, I think this iteration of MSI's VENTUS design is surprisingly slick. The two-tone black and silvery gray color scheme is always a classic, the brushed metal backplate looks and feels very fancy, and I think MSI did a great job at keeping the gameriness in check. The card wouldn't necessarily win my vote for the best looking 4080 Super, but I'd definitely consider a third date. But I'll have to take a rain check on that date because it's about time to see what NVIDIA's latest frame-pushing wallet drainer can do. Now, for GPU testing, I changed things up for this one, switching to a Ryzen 7 7800X3D, while sticking with MSI's Pro X670P, Cooler Masters ML240R, 32 gigs of Gale's Evo 5 running at 6000 MHz CL32 timings, Crucial's P5 Plus as the main drive, and Antec's signature 1000 watt power supply. And just to get a quick taste of what the card is capable of, let's fire up some synthetic benchmarks in the form of Unigine superposition and 3D Mark's timesfire. And man, if you hope this card would be anything less than incredible, then you're gonna be sorely disappointed. The 4080 Super crushes it in both benchmarks, pulling out the highest scores I've gotten with any graphics card in, well, ever. Moving on to actual game testing, even though I knew it would be pointless because a card like this is stupid for 1080p and would hit a CPU bottleneck at that resolution pretty quick, I tested it anyway. Now, as expected in games like Far Cry 6, the Resident Evil 4 remake, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Horizon Zero Dawn, the CPU bind at 1080p proves to be too much to show decent scaling, with the 4080 Super only coming out ahead of its closest rival by 4 to 14%. Luckily, the rest of the games tested had a little more room for the Super's lead to grow. And by a little, I mean a lot. In Baldur's Gate 3 and Alan Wake 2, the card managed to jump ahead of the pack by 38 and 37% respectively, with the rest of the lineup landing somewhere between that and 17%. Not a bad result at all, but at 1080p, the 4080 Super was held back enough that it only outperformed its closest rival on my charts, the 6900 XT, by a total average of 21%, much lower than it's capable of. If you're thinking of getting this card for 1080p gaming, then just don't. Just don't. Alright, moving on to 1440p, this is where the 4080 Super should finally be able to stretch its legs, and man, what sexy long legs they are. At this resolution, it becomes clear that the 4080 Super is in a class of its own when compared to the other cards in the lineup. The Super's win over its closest rivals ranges from around the 16 to 25% mark in some games that tend to favor AMD, have some optimization issues, or are slightly CPU bound even at 1440p, while in most of the other games, it's an outright massacre. With the total of all the averages tallied up, the 4080 Super managed a much more significant 31% lead over the 6900 XT and a 42% win over the 7800 XT. But as impressive as the 1440p performance is, I think the 4080 Super has even more to give, so let's switch on over to 4K. And man, am I glad we have cards like this for 4K. At this resolution, the 4080 Super has nothing holding it back anymore, and it makes short work of the rest of the cards once again. Small-ish victories here and there in some games, just like we saw at 1440p, but overall, it's another very clean, very impressive sweep for the 4080 Super. Across all the games tested, the Super's lead ranged between 18 and an astonishing 52%, with the majority of titles being on the higher end of that scale. And with all the averages combined, the 4080 Super supremacy is cemented even more, with it landing at 33% faster than the 6900 XT and 47% faster than the 7800 XT at 4K. Now, because ray tracing has crept into so many games now and has actually become a worthwhile feature over the last few years, here are some more charts. Clearly, Nvidia's early adoption of the technology has been and is still paying off in a big way. Even though the two AMD cards tried to put up a fight, other than Far Cry 6 and maybe the Resident Evil 4 remake, there's really no contest here. Nvidia's latest ray tracing beast just can't be beat, and its performance goes beyond playable into legitimately impressive in the majority of the titles tested. Really impressive stuff. And unfortunately for AMD and Intel for that matter, Nvidia's DLSS is still the superior upscaling tech, providing bigger FPS boosts and, in my opinion, better looking frames at that too. And to top it off, Nvidia's frame gen boosts performance even more while still leaving games looking great, even if it does come at the cost of some responsiveness. Okay, now that we've seen the gaming performance, let's take a quick look under the card's hood. During testing, MSI's 4080 Super VENTUS 3X OC managed to hit a blistering clock speed of 2745 MHz, a speed it maintained while drawing a max of 311 watts, which surprisingly isn't all that much higher than either of the two AMD cards. It also managed to keep the GPU relatively cool, with it maxing out at around 70 degrees C, a completely manageable temperature, especially considering fans only ramped up to 50% or 1826 RPM. It was also barely audible at that fan speed through my case's side panel, though at 100% you're definitely going to hear it heaving. Alright, so what to make of the most supercharged super card? Well, other than feeling like this is what the 4080 should have been all along, I think the 4080 Super is a win for gamers. Sure, performance uplift over the 4080 isn't all that amazing, at least from what I've heard from people who actually had a regular 4080 to compare it to. And sure, it's not going to blow your socks off with a ton of new features or crazy efficiency gains. But none of that matters. All that matters here is that $1,000 price tag. At that price, Nvidia has almost no real competition to worry about. The 4080 Super's closest rival is AMD's 7900 XTX, which should perform just very slightly worse and can be found for around the same price or a bit lower at the time of filming. And while the 7900 XTX is an amazing card in its own right, the 4080 Super still has the advantage of a larger, more refined feature set, including even more impressive DLSS and better RT performance. This means that unless AMD cuts the price of the 7900 XTX by a decent margin, which I'm betting they just might, hopefully, then the 4080 Super stands unopposed as the second best graphics card you can buy right now, along with being a pretty decent value at that, even if it is a little underwhelming as far as upgrades go. Almost as underwhelming as my video outros. Yep, this video is done and I need to go get some sleep. Remember to buy all of the things using my Amazon affiliate links down below to help the channel out. Get subscribed, like the video if you wanna, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Cheers.